We're rolling.
Welcome to the House Dudes podcast, where we invite you to follow us on our journey towards financial freedom using the power of real estate. I'm Jack Haas.
And I'm Josh Koth. Here at House Dudes, we believe in a couple key principles. Number one, the best way to retain information is by teaching it to others. And number two, a rising tide lifts all boats. We're not competitors, we're a community. So let's get into some real estate investing.
Well, welcome to part two of our series on how to find deals. So today we're going to kind of go a deeper dive on some of the categories we talked about on the previous episode.
Right. So remember, the two main differentiators are how much time something takes and how much money something takes. So if you have more time, less money, that's kind of the first batch that we're going to focus on. And we took some that we thought would group well together.
So we're going to start with driving for dollars, and everybody knows that that means exactly what it sounds. You're either driving around and trying to find those distressed properties yourself. And one of those tips that I always suggest is that if you have a full-time job and you're making that drive every day, make sure you take a different path every day. You'd be surprised what you might find.
And one way you can kind of make that the most efficient way possible would be to get a map of your city and kind of draw, make a grid out of your town and, label it A1, A2, whatever, each block of the city, or a few, make squares around certain neighborhoods, and just make sure that, okay, for this month, I'm going to drive in this neighborhood. The next month, I'm going to hit this neighborhood. So that way you really methodically kind of canvas your way through your entire town. And it's kind of interesting. I've sort of done it the sloppy way, where I just kind of try to hit a different route when I'm driving around. But it's amazing the streets that I've never been on, even though I've lived in this town for 30 some years. There's plenty of streets I've never been on still. And you want to make sure you canvas your town as completely as possible. So the best and most efficient way would be make a grid and then just methodically work your way through the entire town. I mean, you want to hopefully get eyeballs on every property in your town, and depending on the size, obviously. But
so, yeah, and while you're doing it, don't forget to write down the address so that later on you can possibly look up the property tax records, get the mailing address, and a few other pieces of information so that you can send out that marketing piece.
Right. So, and the other key with driving for dollars is, you want to try to be as organized as you can. So make sure you have a way to record these addresses. Let's say you drive up to a property and you think it meets your criteria of looking distressed or possibly vacant, or might be a good flip, whatever your criteria is locally. How are you writing? You have a tablet next to you in your car. Are you taking a picture of it with your phone and sending yourself an email? You can use an app like Deal Machine, which allows you to snap a picture of the house and will automatically send a mailing piece to the owner. That's a nice, efficient way to do it. But you can do it as granularly, as manually as you like. But make sure that you have that system thought through. How because as we're going to mention, and we're going to beat you over the head with this, follow through and follow up is so huge. So what's your system A to Z of how, once you drive by a property, how are you going to get in touch with that potential owner?
And you might think about going as far as the next step, where it's called door knocking, where you actually, if you feel like you have the wherewithal to do it, if you see something that's distressed, we have had some people decide that is the prime opportunity to get out of their car, go up to the door, and see if anybody's home.
Right. And door knocking, again, I'll make the case that you should be as methodical as possible. If you have a grid of your city and you just section off different neighborhoods and just work it like you're canvassing, like you're a politician, and you want to talk to every citizen in town. If there's particular neighborhoods you'd like to focus on as a flipper or a landlord, that's the ones you should start on and target those, and just start at one end of the street and just literally knock on every door and have a way of tracking those responses. Because what are the options? Either they're not going to be home, they're going to be home when they said go away, or they're going to be home when they're potentially interested. That's kind of your three three options as far as your responses from running into a potential seller. So how are you going to track those, and how are you going to follow up on the people that did have an interest, and more importantly, how are you going to follow up on the vacant ones where nobody answered the door? Is it a question of writing down the address and then taking them through your driving for dollars workflow, or are you going to come back and try to knock at a different day, a different time, and try to catch them? All depends on, too, whether you think that property is vacant, obviously, or occupied. If it's occupied, you should try to come back.
So another part of that is phone calls. You might want to just see if you can find the phone number and give them a call. A great place for that is, believe it or not, still the white pages. And I'm surprised how many people forget about that, because a lot of the people that would have equity in their house actually still have a landline phone. So you might want to just check online in the white pages, and before you go through a skip trace process, it might be freely available to you.
Yeah, that should be the first option. Just do a simple lookup, and you might get lucky and get a phone number that somebody you can just call directly. If that doesn't work, then you can go a little bit deeper, looking at property tax records, skip tracing, that type of thing. But always have a way to chase down the lead until you hit the dead end. And then even if you think you're at a dead end, go a little bit further and see if you can bust through the brick wall. And, the harder it is, here's another kind of tip and rule of thumb. It's the harder it is to get a hold of the seller, the chances are much higher that there's a better deal there if it does come together. Because most other investors are not going to take that type of effort. So if it was very hard to get a hold of them, chances are no other investor is talking to them either. So see that as a good thing, not a bad thing. Don't just give up and say, well, couldn't find them. Say, no, how could I? What have it built into your workflow of one more step that you think you need to go, one more step, until you're very, very confident that you did everything you could to try to reach that seller.
And everything seems to be leading back to the fact, and we've pushed it a few times here now, that you really need to do a good job in collecting some of this information and do your follow-ups. And because mostly a lot of your best leads are going to be those known sellers or people that you need to follow up with that are already in your database. So we're going to definitely push the concept of getting some sort of CRM under your belt as quickly as possible. And if you don't want to spend the money on it, there are plenty of free or very inexpensive solutions out there. We know a lot of people who start off with Podio. HubSpot has got a free tier. Zoho is really inexpensive. So take a look at some of those solutions and get a CRM going. Even if it's going to be temporary, you might outgrow it eventually, but you have to have a way to follow up not only the contacts, but those properties.
Right. So at the end of your day of driving for dollars, door knocking, whatever method you're choosing, you need to come back and log all those names and institute your workflow for following up with them. If somebody was interested, you definitely want to follow up with them. But even if no one was home, what's going to be your process for reminding yourself to go back to this specific address and go knock on their door again or call them again? That needs to happen on a regular basis until you get a hold of them and they tell you to go away, or you have a chance to talk to them about potentially buying their house.
So heading over to Bandit Signs, this is something that can be of particular interest, because what we've definitely found is that the more homemade these things look, the more attention they typically get for some reason. I'm not exactly sure of the science or why that is, but it sure seems to be the case for us.
Yeah, I think it has to do with appearing more authentic and personal. And that's kind of a running theme on a lot of this less money required marketing is, take advantage of the fact that it's just you and you're just a person, and kind of lean into that. And the more raw and personal and handwritten the signs look, the better. And like you said, I'm not sure of the psychology behind that, but I think it speaks to the authenticity of the person who's marketing. So the less slick you appear, the better. And I think the seller is sort of put at ease thinking that, oh, I'm just dealing with a person, trying to make a living here. And that's better than some, where you buy houses, incorporated kind of large company that puts their guard up when they think a big corporation is coming to talk to them about buying their house. So one of the advantages you have of being a one-man show is that it is just you, and lean into that rather than run away from it. Mm-hmm. So Bandit Signs, if you're going to DIY them, there's plenty of ways to do that. So you can, start by ripping up cardboard boxes, sticking them taping them to a wooden stake, pounding in the ground, writing on that. That's an option. If you want to spend a little bit of money, that's not quite the same as, buying pre-printed professional-looking signs. You can buy the cardboard blanks. I found some on Amazon. They're fairly cheap. They're way cheaper than having them printed. You can write on those. And actually, that might be even better than a professionally printed sign, is buy the blanks, write on them, or even if you paid somebody to write on them. But, we're talking about methods that require your effort and your time now. So if you're going to just make a stack of 100, you might get some carpal tunnel, but get to writing with a marker and put those out. And the other thing I'll say on Bandit Signs, a lot of people will put out 10, 15 signs, don't get any calls, and then just say, well, that didn't work, and then move on to something else. Mm-hmm. And what we found with Bandit Signs is you really need to be consistent. Of course, this is true. We're going to be a broken record. This is true for all of these marketing methods. But Bandit Signs specifically, you need to pick a number that you can do, and do that weekly, monthly, whatever you feel you can actually accomplish, and put them out. Because if you don't, you're definitely not going to get a response. One batch of 10 signs is not going to get you anything.
Yeah, I mean, how many times have we gotten a phone call because somebody had gotten a postcard 6 months ago and they just had thrown it in the drawer? It's like that for anything, mm-hmm. The Bandit Signs, that's consistent, persistent behavior is what's going to pay off in the end. I kind of wonder if, being you've mentioned more than once, and I'm sure everybody is aware how cheap I am. So you're always looking for a bargain. So you're driving down the road and my eye automatically goes to garage sales, but I never go to garage sales, which is funny, but my eye automatically goes there. I wonder if that's the tendency. Like people just happen to see out of the corner of their eye a handwritten sign. So it draws your attention.
Yeah. Maybe you think, oh, there's a deal there, it triggers something psychologically in your subconscious. Who knows?
So we definitely found that placing these Bandit Signs typically on a Friday, and they'll last through the weekend. As you probably are aware, a lot of cities don't really like having these Bandit Signs sitting out. So that seems to be the longest duration we can get away with, is you put them out on a Friday, the city crews are out, they're not working on the weekend. So at least you get a good 3-4 days of viewing.
Yeah, and there's all kinds of schools of thought, and this is obviously very market specific. You need to know your locality, your municipality, and whatever the rules are. And different cities are going to be more hardcore and more tolerant of this. We've had pretty good luck, but we definitely treat Bandit Signs as disposable. We put them out there knowing that they're going to get thrown away, they're going to get tore down. Some people are going to get angry. You're going to take some angry calls. And, that, again, you need to have a way to filter those calls out. So, hopefully they're not calling your cell phone directly. Hopefully you've at least set up something in your CRM to take calls, or a Google Voice number or something, so you're not dealing with that backlash directly. Mm-hmm. So just, understand the laws of where your local market is and how you can best work within that system. Obviously, you don't want to be paying a bunch of fines or getting in trouble constantly with the city. So you have to figure out how far you can push that. But we found that it's best to view Bandit Signs as disposable. We put them out, and then that's, they're going to be gone, and we're going to have to buy another batch next month. But in some markets, I know some investors, they go around on Friday, put out a 50 or 100 or whatever their amount is for that week, and they go around Sunday night and pick them up again. That if that's how you have to operate, and that's a lot more effort, but if you can get the signs back and reuse them again the next week, and you can kind of get away with that, you have to decide how far you can push that in your local market.
Yeah, that's a good way to keep some of the costs down too. If you can recover, even half of those signs and reuse them the next weekend. It might be beneficial. Where you've done a lot more of the Bandit Sign stuff. So we actually, I'm sure we're going to cover the Bandit Signs a little bit more on, the cost versus the time aspect, but where are the best places for people to put their signs?
That's one thing we should definitely highlight is you want to put it where they're not going to be flying by going 50 miles an hour. They need to be able to read the number and jot down the number or have a quick URL on there. And there's all kinds of psychology behind whether you put a URL, if that looks too slick, or just a phone number and what kind of phone numbers are easy to remember, that kind of stuff. But regardless, you can't have them flying by going 50, 60 miles an hour. So you want to put it at a place where they're going to be stopped for a minute. So stoplights, stop signs, usually off to the right on the boulevard, high traffic areas where a lot of traffic is going by and going to be stopped for a minute. That's the best location.
Sure.
So most people will see it for the longest time.
Yeah, and make sure you don't put it on. We typically advise people not to try to avoid putting it in people's yards. You're just going to get a lot of people upset. And in fact, we recently had a situation where a neighbor or something just took it upon himself to start collecting all the signs that our fellow put out.
Yeah, people will get their dander up over Bandit Signs. It's funny that you can go to a corner and there'll be 20 garage sale signs and no one cares. But you see one Bandit sign and people just get resentful and get irate.
And they will take it upon themselves to start blanketing the neighborhood and start pulling them.
Yeah, they want to cleanse the neighborhood of our evil capitalism. That's kind of the vibe. And, we'll get lots of angry calls, and you just have to treat that as it's just part of doing business.
So heading over to yellow letters, this is probably one of the more popular ways to market, right? But the do-it-yourself side of it would be that you actually get a list and handwrite or print off and mail them yourself. There's a lot of services that do this, and we'll talk about that on a later episode.
Yeah, and we're covering, what can you do yourself through your own efforts. Well, let's say you were in one of the earlier steps, you were door knocking or driving for dollars, and you accumulated a bunch of addresses and names. Well, this is one way you can reach out to those people in addition to some of those other methods. I mean, why wouldn't you door knock, skip trace, and call them and send them a letter? I mean, why not do all three? If you really have the time and willing to put forth the effort, any way of contacting them is beneficial. So just throw them all out there. And yellow letters, have been proven to work. Direct mail works. And there's something, I don't know what the psychology is about the paper being yellow. Like, it's just a yellow legal pad. That's kind of what it originated from. For some reason, that gets a decent response, maybe better than on white. And you can kind of Google this and see what ink color looks the best, what type of handwriting, whether it's cursive or printing, looks better, and some types of sample letters and how they're written to get some ideas. But I think the best thing you can do is get just a yellow legal pad and handwrite letter, and look on the internet for some ideas as far as the language. But the more personal and emotional, the better. Mm-hmm. And if you write it personally to them from you, that's going to have the best chance of getting a response.
Yeah, I've read somewhere too that try to avoid using black ink because then it looks like it's been photocopied and people will put less value on it. So use a different color ink is typically a good idea.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people use blue ink on yellow paper, red ink, do your research and see what appeals to you. Again, you want to be your most authentic self. So don't be afraid to just write it personally, like you're writing, like you'd be speaking to the seller in person. Use the fact that you're an individual. Use that to your benefit. And again, we're going to pound the broken record here. You need to commit to a certain amount of these that you're going to do and give yourself a deadline and say, I'm going to do 50 a week, 100 a week, 10 a week, whatever that number is, and do it consistently, do it without fail, and you will get responses.
So the last topic would be cold calling, where you actually have a list of names and phone numbers and you're just starting to dial for dollars. what I think here is really important is, and that I think has been working for us, is that if I'm cold calling anybody, I'm pretty transparent, and I actually start off by saying, I know this is out of the blue, but would you happen to be the owner of this property? I'm pretty folksy, I guess, when it comes to that, and allow them to know that I understand right off that this is really a strange, out of the blue phone call. You might as well acknowledge it.
Exactly. I mean, be authentic again, and the less slick you are, the better, honestly. So don't feel like you have to be Tony Robbins on the phone calling them and having some super slick sales pitch. In fact, the more unprofessional and probably nervous and stammering you are, the more endearing that's going to be to the person, and they're going to be less threatened by you. And if you're just super folksy, apologetic for interrupting them and just letting them, like you said, say it's out of the blue and you probably don't know who I am or why I'm calling, but this is why, just be super upfront about it. That's going to get you the least amount of massive rejection. And any way you slice it in cold calling, there's going to be massive amounts of rejection. So just like door knocking or any of this, you have to really have a thick skin and be able to just take the rejection and move on to the next name. And as quickly as you can, just power through those names.
Yep. So part of that is picking that consistent amount that you're going to be able to do on a daily basis, and then just being very repetitive and habitual about it.
Now let's talk about, where are you going to get a list? Obviously in the series, later on in the series, when we speak about expensive marketing methods or ones that require more capital, there's you can buy straight up lists. So where would you get a list of names to cold call?
Like I said before, I'd probably start with the white pages. Mm-hmm. You'd be surprised that they just happen to be the same target audience more times than not, because if it's an older person who still has a landline phone, you can't get any cheaper than just searching your city in the white pages.
Right. That's a great place to start if you have no names to start with.
Especially if your town still produces phone books. Go to your grocery store and get yourself a phone book. There's your list, and you just cross them off as you're dialing down the list.
Yep, and then remember to have a CRM set up, or you need to have some way to track your responses, because this is going to there's no way anybody could remember any of this. Once you've called 100 people, which ones said, sure, come look at my house, and which ones told me to go to hell, and which ones said, call me back in 6 months. You cannot remember this stuff. And cold calling is really a numbers game more than anything else, because you can do it so quickly. You're just sitting there dialing. It takes less time than walking and door knocking would, less time than writing a yellow letter. You can call somebody and have that conversation complete in like 20, 30 seconds per person. And if you don't get a response, or if they say go to hell, boom, on to the next number. So you need to have a quick, efficient way of tracking all those responses. And even if you're just flagging them cold, warm, and hot, and have them entered into some type of CRM or Excel spreadsheet or something.
Right.
Some way to track that. And, the white pages is a great place. This also, after you start accumulating names into your CRM from doing all the other methods, people that have called in on Bandit Signs, people that you door knocked, people that you drove for dollars and looked them up, and you start populating your CRM, getting a database built once a month. Especially if you have a lot of time and you don't have a ton of names, why wouldn't you once a month just call everybody in your database? Mm-hmm. Until that becomes, too large to do that effectively, then just divide it up into chunks and say, I'm going to call, everybody's going to get a call every 2 months or whatever. And we can talk about, different ways of texting everyone and ringless voicemail, and those are a little more capital-intensive methods. But when you're starting out and you have nothing but time, why not call? If you have 20 people in your database, why not call them once a month?
We're talking about this follow-up, and one of those things that I completely forgot about. And if you wanted to go super low-tech, almost free solution for a CRM or a follow-up system, we heard of a real estate investor who doesn't have a traditional CRM. He uses one of those 31-day folders that you can buy at Office Max, and anytime he wants to do a follow-up item, let's say a few days from now, he puts it in that date in that folder. So he just pulls out what he needs on a daily basis, and then he just advances it to the next day wherever he has to follow up again.
Right. If it's calling back in a week, you put it a week later in the folder, right?
Yep. I mean, you can't go any low tech than that. And he runs his whole multi-million-dollar business on just that.
Yeah. And again, that, let's kind of move into some takeaways here. And that's consistency, right? So whatever method or CRM or tracking, whatever tracking method that you will use and do consistently is great. If it's as low tech as a folder system or some super advanced CRM that, you paid a bunch of money for, ultimately, if you grow to that level, they can all be super effective or super ineffective. They're only going to be as effective as you make them. So, you have to commit to that consistency. That's so important. And then, like we say, the highest ROI of any strategy is follow-up. So no matter what of these strategies, and a lot of times people get distracted by the newest, shiniest ninja trick or whatever, but really you can't beat just good old-fashioned follow-up. So get out there and aggressively follow up until what's the phrase? Follow up until they're dead or you're dead or both.
Or they basically tell you to drop dead.
Yeah. You can hear all combinations of that.
Yeah. So get ready to get uncomfortable too. A lot of this stuff is going to be uncomfortable. Calling these people or knocking on doors or doing a variety of these things. We're not going to say that it's easy. In fact, it can be uncomfortable, especially at first. But just like everything else, once you get in that mindset and it's repetition is king, when it comes to that, you'll eventually just get used to it. It's never not going to be uncomfortable. But we also put it into perspective. A lot of these people, this is probably going to be the only interaction you have with them. And you worrying over it is more time spent than what they'll ever think about you again. I mean, it'll be a blip on their radar, and they're moved on with their life. Treat it as such.
Right. And if you're super nice, empathetic, smiling on the phone or at the door, or have nice language in your letter, whatever method you're using, if you are very empathetic and nice during all interactions, you can usually turn those people around, or even if they still do hate you at the end of it, you just move on to the next one, and that says more about them than it does about you. So don't take it personally, and just remember it's a numbers game for all these strategies.
One of the last things that we're probably going to hammer home one more time is that the more personal, raw, and authentic your ads are, the better, and the more attention they're likely going to draw.
Right, and a lot of investors feel like, I got to get trained up to be like a Tony Robbins, Grant Cardone, super slick, private jet, flying salesman guy. And honestly, that works against you. So go ahead and be awkward, be, unconfident, and it's disarming to the potential seller. So don't be afraid of that. Lean into that. Take advantage of personality quirks. Those things are advantages, not disadvantages. And just remember to be super nice in all your interactions and empathetic, and that'll serve you well.
And one of the things that we've definitely learned is that when you ask for permission, you can almost ask or say anything. So don't be afraid to be apologetic and ask ahead of time. One of the first things when I'm calling, I'll actually say, I know this is out of the blue, but do you happen to own this house? And then I'll follow up saying, it sounds like you're busy. Can I call you back at another time? You'd be surprised how many people will say, yeah, I am busy, but yeah, you can call me back later. It's surprising what people will tell you and what they will agree to when you just simply ask for permission.
All right, we'll see you on the next episode for more strategies using a lot of your time and effort, but don't require a lot of capital.
See you next time. We've put a lot of effort into providing useful content, and if you've found value in the show and have any interest in supporting us with a small donation, head over to patreon.com/housedudes.
And if you have any thoughts or questions, shoot us an email at info@housedudes.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter @housedudes. And if you like what you're hearing, head over to iTunes, subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. It really helps other investors out there find the show.
And remember, massive positive impact requires
massive positive action. We'll see you next time. This episode was brought to you by HouseDudes.com. Do you have time to actively manage flipping and rentals yourself? If so, go for it. If you live in a market that won't cash flow or don't have the time to do all the work, are you just out of luck? If there was a way to participate more passively, would that appeal to you? I'm sure you have questions about how the process works and what to do next. If that's the case, fill out the form on housedudes.com/investors, and we'll reach out to see if you are a good fit for our business. This is first come, first serve, and we will have to stop taking applications when our goals are met. See you at housedudes.com/investors.
I don't like to tell a man what to do with his money, but if you ain't investing in property, then you're dumber than a dummy.
I'm not dumb. I'm smart.
Well, buy property. That's my advice.